Hi, I'm Nikki. Welcome to Relitigated, the show where five friends who are not lawyers attempt to retry a real Supreme Court case. This is episode 6, Schenck versus the United States. 2 quick notes before we get started. First, as always, we try our best to represent the facts and decisions in the case as accurately as possible, but we're not lawyers, and nothing in this episode should be taken as legal advice. Second, if you enjoy the podcast, please support us by subscribing, rating, leaving us a comment, and telling your friends. We could use the help in getting the word out. If you like, you can also find us on YouTube and Instagram. Our handle is Relitigated Podcast. Thanks so much for your help. Now, with that out of the way, let's start the show.
Nikki and Jarrett, I do think we should get started soon before this derails any further.
I'm not host tonight.
Oh my god.
Oh, shit, that's right. Okay, hang on. I've got my life together, it's fine. Welcome to the Relitigated Podcast. I am your host, Nikki, and I'm joined by my co-host, Jarrett.
What's up?
We also have with us 3 justices, except they are not justices or lawyers or legally informed at all. First, we have Associate Justice Adam.
You told me if I provided a judgment on this case, you would let me out of the basement.
Maybe. We'll think about it.
We will not.
Then we have Associate Justice Chris.
Hello.
And of course, we have our Chief Justice, Sarah.
Hello.
All of them with their judicial powers granted by God.
Absolutely. From the divine.
I don't think that's how that works.
I had
Of course
no
it is.
idea. I had no idea I was invested with this kind of responsibility and power simultaneously.
Where do you
Yeah.
think the power comes from, Adam?
Like George Washington's Revenant? I assume that
His
George
teeth?
Washington had been like honed into like a soul gem of some sort that powers our constitution? Unclear.
Yeah, absolutely. Jarrett and I, who are not lawyers, have picked a real Supreme Court case. Our justices, not lawyers, do not know what case we have selected. Jarrett will introduce the case to us and walk us through the details. The justices are free to ask factual questions during this time. Then we'll move into oral arguments where today I will represent the petitioner, the person complaining, and Jarrett will be the respondent, the government, who is being complained about. We each get 7 minutes to make our case, during which the justices can interrupt us and ask us questions. When the arguments are over, the justices will deliberate and deliver their own opinions. Final rulings don't need to be unanimous. Majority opinion wins. And even if 2 or more justices agree, they can disagree as to why. Once we've finished our hearing and Sarah's court makes its ruling, Jarrett and I will reveal what the Supreme Court actually decided and talk about how we feel about the results. And Jarrett, take it away.
All right. So for this week, we're going to be talking about Schenck v. United States. Now, before we get started, I just want to take a minute and go through some background information that I think will be important to know, and then we'll get into the actual case itself. So first...
This sounds like the underdog's case of the century.
Yeah.
Just like one guy versus like everyone else.
Probably.
Kind of. I mean, technically, sure. They do have a co-conspirator, so...
He's innocent, Your Honor. Free him.
Okay, so it's Schenck and some other random guy versus everyone else. Still tough odds.
Yeah. First thing you need to know is that when the events of this case took place, the United States was at war. That is important.
Have we ever not been at war?
We'll tell
Correct.
you what war it was towards the end of the episode, so that we don't give away exactly when this case took place. But just the key thing to remember is, yes, at the time, we were actually at war. Second thing, I also just want to very quickly give you a primer on the Espionage Act, since it's the main piece of legislation that this case revolves around.
Ooh,
This
spicy.
act talks about several spying-related crimes, as the name implies, but it's Section 3 that's the most important or most relevant part. It makes it illegal during wartime to interfere with the successful operation of the U.S. military by conveying or making false reports, to willfully cause or attempt to cause insubordination, disloyalty, mutiny, or the refusal of duty of anyone in the U.S. military, and to willfully obstruct the recruiting or the enlistment to service of service members for the U.S. military. So,
Listen, I don't want to sidetrack us, but that sounds like it could literally be anything.
I guess we'll find out.
Wow.
Basically, do not aid the enemy by causing problems for the U.S. military during wartime. Don't spread false information, and don't try to stop people from doing what they are legally tasked with doing.
So mind your own business is what I'm hearing.
Right? Just behave.
The act also gave the postmaster the ability to deny delivery of any material sent through the mail if the content of that material would violate any of the provisions of this law. Any questions on the Espionage Act before I move on to the actual case?
Yeah, but I don't know if you can answer it. How would a postman even know what they're delivering?
It's a spicy question.
Anyways, we
That's
don't
a
have
great
to,
question.
we don't have to really get into it, but just food for thought.
Sounds
How would they know what's in the
oddly
mail?
circumstantial to this case.
Did they have a warrant?
I don't know. Anyway, that'll probably be another case that
Yeah.
comes up at some point.
That's
Okay,
fine.
so for this week's case, we begin with CS, who was the leading member of the U.S. Socialist Party at the time.
Oh, this is going to
the
be
outbreak
good.
of the war, following the outbreak of the war and the institution of a draft through the Conscription Act, CS is alleged to have overseen the printing and the mailing of 15,000 leaflets that encouraged young men to resist the draft.
He was also running an illegal lottery. That's a callback.
if only. One side of the leaflet was fully dedicated to arguing that the Conscription Act was unconstitutional and that it should be ignored or defied. It included the 13th Amendment, which was passed after the Civil War and reads, quote, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction," end quote. The leaflet argued that pressing men into service meant forcing them into involuntary servitude, and as such, the Conscription Act made men, quote, "little better than a convict," end quote.
This guy totally would have been message board moderator in our day and time.
100%. It also insinuated that conscription is despotism, quote, "a monstrous wrong against humanity," end quote, and serves only, quote, "Wall Street's chosen few," end quote. I do feel like I've had this conversation with somebody in the past week. So like every word of this. So the leaflet further urged, this is just one side, by the way, it further urged people not to submit to intimidation and to petition for a repeal of the Conscription Act. On the other side, it stated to, quote, "assert your rights," end quote, including the right to oppose the draft, and stated that by not doing so, you are helping to deny rights that, quote, "it is the solemn duty of all citizens and residents of the United States to retain," end quote.
Verily, doth subscribe to my Instagram to learneth more.
Lots of quotes on this one.
Link in bio.
It also stated that arguments in favor of the draft come from, quote, "cunning politicians and a mercenary capitalist press."
Oh, this guy is on it.
Way ahead of his time. It doesn't matter what time he's in, he's way ahead of his time.
So CS, along with co-conspirator EB, so that's the other person, was arrested and tried for conspiracy to violate the Espionage Act by obstructing the recruitment and the enlistment of service members. They were both found guilty in a court of law, but they appealed their convictions up to the Supreme Court on the grounds that the statute of the Espionage Act used to convict them violated their First Amendment rights to freedom of speech. Which brings us now to the question before this court: did CS's conviction under the Espionage Act for criticizing the draft and inviting people to resist the draft violate his First Amendment right to freedom of speech?
Well, that's a loaded question.
Sound good to everyone?
I heard you guys wanted more easy cases. or less controversial cases, so we thought we'd get you one.
Aww.
All right, I'm going to go
Is
ahead and
that
propose
sarcasm?
a new court doctrine for us. We need a fascism index. How fascist is our United States society at the moment this ruling was made? I feel like it's really important. Like, just how willing are we to suppress all of our fundamental rights to, maintain the safety of our children or whatever?
Well, I don't know about you guys, but the whole sound of this intro is very like World War II-y, in my opinion.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So I don't know. I guess we'll find out after we deliberate.
Yeah,
Yay.
potentially either World War II or Vietnam or
Oh, true.
yeah.
Hmm.
But yeah.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. During World War II, we were all willing to entertain just like a little bit of extra fascism to prevent, the super fascists from taking over.
Yes.
Right. A
nationalists.
healthy amount of fascism.
A healthy amount.
Yeah.
A sustainable.
Fascism in moderation.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
Anything's fine in moderation.
Yeah,
Especially
sprinkle of fascism.
Yeah, a little bit here, a little bit there.
Yeah, I'm not signing my name to any of that statement.
Yep, still waiting for that pendulum to swing back in the other direction any day now.
I've got 7 minutes on the clock for whatever arguments are ready.
All right. I'm ready to go if the justices will have me.
We will absolutely have you, Nikki.
Come inside.
All right. Okay, so here I am representing CS. May it please the court. In considering this act and this conviction, we need to look at the U.S. Constitution, specifically the First Amendment, which says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. The First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution is specifically crafted to protect the populace from the intrusion of government. It prohibits Congress from passing laws curtailing individuals' rights to express opinions. And in looking to a foundational document to this great nation, it makes clear that criticizing the government or a law is not illegal. Of course, it's easy to say the right words about freedoms and rights during easy times. The true test of a nation and of a government is how we, the people, treat the vulnerable and how we respond to challenging times. We are now in challenging times. And we are speaking about a person who is a member of a group that does not hold a majority opinion and as such are admittedly unpopular. Regardless of popularity, CS has rights, and he was exercising them. He was exercising his right to speak his opinion, essentially that war and that people dying are bad, and that citizens have rights. He is exercising his right, just as he is now exercising his right to seek redress. Dissent is inevitable and is crucial for a healthy society. There is value in multiple voices, which the court is well aware of in its own decision-making. We are certainly at war, yes, but we should still avoid mass panic and fear, which often leads us to focus not on our common threat, but on those among us who are the most vulnerable to attack. This conviction is a march toward a suspension of personal rights that are enshrined in the founding of this nation, recognized as unalienable, and which this court has been tasked to uphold. Our rights are not subject to suspension when it conveniences the government. If this conviction stands, it will show that the government's convenience will be shaped by whatever it deems to be the enemy of the people at that time, and whatever it deems to be in the interest of security. This means the government will use this law as a means of targeting its citizens and chilling healthy dissent. This means the government can decide when limits on it do and do not apply, which undercuts the purpose of the constitutional protections. This flies in the face of the ideals of democracy and freedom. This court's job is to serve as a check on legislative and executive overreach, and by upholding this conviction, the court is disregarding its responsibility. Thank you, and I will take any questions that you have.
I do have a question.
Mhm.
First of all, Nikki, great job. Love the argument. I'm
Thank you.
super pro free speech, personally.
Mm.
So I think that is a great stance that you're taking.
Mhm. Good start.
I am a little bit, I don't know, nervous to completely side with you, though, because in the Espionage Act, it does say that it's illegal to willfully obstruct the recruiting or enlistment of service members, right? So
Correct.
what do you think about that? Like, we have free speech and the Espionage Act, like, butting heads pretty clearly here.
So I would argue that it would be necessary for the government to prove that any such obstruction took place. So
I love that answer. Okay. You're welcome to continue if you need to.
Oh.
I just wanted to affirm you.
So yeah, they need to prove that any obstruction took place, that this pamphlet of this person's opinion led to masses of drafted young men to not serve in the military effort. Or did it lead citizens to petition and seek redress through legal means?
I think that those are very fair.
Right? Like, I'm always super, super suspicious whenever any organization like goes out of its way to silence like a single critic or like, some lowly person, issuing their opinion into the void, especially pre-internet. Like, this guy's like, what, making a pamphlet, like a newsletter? He's got a zine. Like, who's going to actually hear this guy's opinion? Like, this guy's opinion is so damaging and so profoundly like harmful to your cause of recruiting that you need to silence him. I think you need better marketing people. You need better PR for your recruiting effort. If this guy's like, enough of a voice to counter your entire effort. And that's kind of the way I feel about like any organization that like complains too much about lone protest voices or voices of dissent. Like, have a better message. No?
No,
I do-
I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think as part of the Espionage Act, you have the shall willfully obstruct the recruiting or enlistment service, implying that those two things are different.
That's a tall requirement either way, though, right? Like
Yeah,
that
is true.
That feels like an active effort that you need to be committing.
This is more of a passive
Yeah.
effort. Yeah.
This is just like saying stuff.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
And in this country, you can literally just say stuff. That's the whole thing.
that's the point.
I love saying stuff. It's my favorite thing.
Yep. That's the point. All right. Well, yeah, no questions for me. Pretty clear.
Yeah.
Actually, I do have a question.
Mhm.
How aggressively was he promoting these views? Like, where and how was he actually distributing this information?
He created pamphlets and then he put them in the mail.
Put them in the
I
mail,
believe
right,
to
okay.
men who'd been selected by the draft.
Was this a time where it was just like illegal to put stuff in people's mailboxes? Because I've been chastised for that. Apparently, very crime. That's a crime. To just
Oh?
put stuff in people's mailboxes. I say
What?
Oh.
this is America, and you should be able to put whatever you want in people's mailboxes, even if it's roadkill.
That just raises questions on my end.
That seems
That's
very
just
specific.
a
Yeah.
very loose, hypothetical example.
We might have to revisit that specific point after we're done recording. Because
Freedom of roadkill. Mhm.
it seems like you've got some personal experience there, which I am curious to know about. No shade.
Listen, guys, if you put a
No, I
stamp
am.
on it, it's part of the U.S. mail system, and it's legal.
Wasn't thinking about this before, but I am now.
Yeah,
He's spending a lot of time
there's a
thinking
lot to
about this
consider
now.
here.
That's it for time.
Thank God.
Really went off on a tangent there. Sorry about that.
Oh, we spiraled.
Well, I mean,
Okay.
when you heap praise upon the person arguing in front of you,
They also ask questions.
Yeah.
Jarrett, maybe we'll find things to compliment about whatever it is you put in front of us.
Probably not.
I
yeah,
hope so.
just hypothetically, again.
Harumph.
All right, Jared, let's get this over with.
I have no idea how you became the heel of this program, but it's really fitting you.
All right, I'm ready to start whenever you are.
All right, here we go. Miss Chief Justice, and may it please the court, just a quick response to something the petitioner had mentioned. Apparently, the petitioner, with enough supporters to fund the printing and mailing of 15,000 leaflets, is some poor and vulnerable person. Come on. Let's start here. The petitioner in this case would have you believe that the First Amendment entitles citizens to say whatever they want in whatever context they want and to face no consequences for doing so. This has never been true. For example, if I was to get in your face and threaten you just using my words to describe the harm that I intended to inflict, I would be committing the crime of assault. Does that violate my First Amendment rights? I don't believe so. It never has in the past. The words that I say, coupled with the context that I say them in, would be used as evidence in court to convict me. You simply cannot extend the protection of free speech to assault. If someone sent a justice or a lawmaker a letter threatening injury or death, the author of the letter would be charged for using speech as a means of committing or supporting a crime. You cannot use speech in order to commit a crime and claim that it is protected. Like any other right, it extends only as far as the point where it begins to cause harm to others. As a free society, we must protect the speaker from a society that would seek to silence them, but under specific contexts, that same society must protect others from the speaker. The context here is very simple. We are a nation at war. Outside actors seek to injure and kill the people of our republic. It is not beyond reason within this context to adjust the limits of speech in order to prevent interference with provisioning of a fighting force that will protect our collective society and the rights we intend to defend. It is one thing to have an opinion. The government does not police this. Standing on a street corner, engaging passerbys in casual conversation in which you exchange opinions is also fine. The government does not police that. Collecting money, hiring a printer, printing an argument on leaflets, enticing others to commit a crime, and then distributing those leaflets to specific individuals who would be in a position to commit the stated crime. Well, I think we can see how the context begins to matter. Make no mistake, the petitioner was conspiring to influence others to commit a crime. The petitioner was not resisting their own draft as an individual in order to take their argument to court and win on its merits. That's what petitioning the government for redress is. No, the petitioner was trying to convince 15,000 other people to commit crimes. Ultimately, the government believes that the First Amendment is important and needs to be protected, but it cannot serve society to view all speech in a vacuum without its context. Speech has consequences, and if, as in this case, the consequences of what you are saying was to cajole any number of others to break the law and risk their own prosecution, then you have committed criminal conspiracy and the weapon was your leaflet. This is not a free speech issue. This is an issue of wanting to get away with a conspiracy to impede the ability of the nation to mount a vigorous defense abroad of the freedoms that the petitioner purports to hide behind now. The limit of not allowing speech to be used to commit a crime or to put another person into harm's way is fair and it is reasonable, and we have always done this. The government doesn't care that CS thinks the draft is illegal. The government doesn't care that CS gathers with like-minded individuals and discusses the idea that the draft is illegal. Plenty of people walk around with personal beliefs of all kinds, and the government doesn't care. If CS sent 15,000 leaflets that say he personally believes the draft was illegal and left it at that, we might not even care about that. It's the next escalation, stating that a specific illegal action should be done, and it should be done by you, the reader of this, who I have targeted as a person who is capable of committing this crime. In this case, resisting the draft. That is the problem. That's the point in which a line has been crossed and a crime has been committed against the wider society. That is what happened here. That is the context. The context matters. With that, I yield to questions.
Okay. I feel like there's like a public harm context threshold. Like, right? I'm speaking with a very contemporary context, right? Like, I have the internet, right? As a kid, I read whatever passed for the Anarchist Cookbook on the internet. Like, that was dangerous. I probably shouldn't have read that. That probably shouldn't have been available to me as a person reading the internet, but it was. But it didn't rise to the level of prosecutable crime because there wasn't enough people who read it and acted on it to be a nuisance. And I kind of feel like this is the same thing, right? Like, it's only a crime because enough people were swayed by this message that it actually had an impact on the recruiting efforts of the US government or the military. Is that the threshold?
Were they swayed? Do we
actually,
know
I'm
if these
assuming
people
they
were
were.
actually swayed?
That's an implicit assumption because it made it to the Supreme Court.
The conspiracies do not have to succeed to be conspiracies, to be crimes. It is the willful action to cajole others to crime.
Sure, but me talking to my dog is not going to be prosecutable because no one's going to know. This made it to the Supreme Court.
Well, not yet.
Right? Not
Correct.
enough people know yet.
Printing 15,000 leaflets of what you say to your dog that asks other people to commit crime on your behalf.
And enough people found that compelling because I could print 30,000 nonsense haikus and distribute them around my neighborhood. No one's going to give a shit. But if I incite people to some specific targeted political action, people will care. But only if that targeted political action is like counter to the efforts and aims of the US government, right? Like, if my effort is to get people to vote, everyone's psyched about that.
I'm trying to think, like, okay, in modern day, right? Let's just say, like, some dude got on TikTok or Instagram and started, or on a podcast, and where they reached hundreds of thousands of people every single day. Yeah, like millions of people every single day, and they started talking about how they just hundreds. Well, and they started talking about how, like, oh, if you get drafted, you should resist the draft, resist war, yada yada yada. Like, is that person going to be charged for conspiracy? Like, I'm just trying to put it in modern day terms.
I mean, if we had another draft, maybe.
I think it's important to remember that this wasn't just an ephemeral speaking into the wind for whoever would hear it.
Right.
This was the going out and finding 15,000 people who are in a specific position, targeting those people. There is planning, there is effort, there is targeting,
and money.
And I should also be said, this is not, the Espionage Act does not say you can't say anything against the government. It specifically just says, look, you can hate the government, you can talk against the government all you want. Just don't get in the way of this particular piece of very critical government business, please. And this individual decided that they were going to target 15,000 people who are in a position to commit this crime and try to influence them to commit this crime. That is the position of the government.
And we are at time.
Thank you, Jarrett. I suppose.
Yeah, you didn't have to say any of those words, but you chose to, I guess.
Okay. Well, interesting one here. I suppose it is time that we deliberate amongst ourselves, is it not?
Please do.
Yes.
We have returned to clerk mode. The Voltron has disassembled back into clerk.
I'm really hung up on this whole idea that if you print 15,000 leaflets, there's like this implicit assumption that it reached 15,000 people and they were receptive to your message. That's really, really good odds for anyone in internet marketing.
No, really. I think you're right. Like, the thing that I'm the most hung up on here is, like, I just feel like the First Amendment is so huge. And just because, yeah, obviously there was planning involved and money involved with getting these leaflets out to specific individuals. But, like, it's not like he was threatening these individuals into, resist the draft or else we will find you and we will hurt you or something. Like,
this guy had no authority. He had no governing authority, no administrative or penal authority.
That was a question that I was going to ask. Was I kind of forgot it earlier.
Was he just some nerd? Like,
well, right. So who is he claiming to be as like the point of authority on these leaflets? Right. At the end of it, he was like, did he sign the leaflets? Hey, we're the government. Don't do the like. Was he
Yeah.
trying to like impersonate? Right.
Well, actually, Nikki, didn't you say that he was? I don't know if it was you or Jarrett that said, was he part of the Socialist Party at this time or
He was
something?
the head of the Socialist Party.
Oh, okay, so he was an influential dude.
He
is what I'm
absolutely had a nom de plume, no question. What was it? Was it just CS?
Yeah, I don't think he had
People
any
knew who he
sort of.
was
Okay.
by his name.
Yeah, I mean that's okay. So he's not impersonating someone else, as he's being himself. But as someone who's in government, that to me,
I
you're
I don't
wasn't
think
in
the
government, he
Socialist
was-
Party was a
yeah.
part of the government.
They were
Yeah,
kind of
wasn't it?
fringe at best.
If it's
Or
the time
political
period that I'm thinking,
figure.
it was probably
Yeah.
more of like a rogue club.
And if you're going to foment revolution, you really need, like, I don't know, like a cool persona to get everyone behind your cause.
That's
You
true.
can't just be some dude. I guess you could in whatever day and age this was.
Yeah, for the most
Or we had
part,
a
it's
draft.
always just been subdued throughout
true.
history. So
Mhm. Yeah, but they usually
both
like
sides.
have a cool name or adopt one at least if they don't have one from
Mhm.
birth.
yeah.
Okay, I have a question. This is very important. If he wrote like an epic poem, like so cool, like the coolest poem that got all the young people to commit to his cause, let's say that he set it to music. Let's say that it was a rock and roll song on the radio and
Oh yeah.
eventually won a Grammy, and that entire band went into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. At that point, is it okay? Like, at what point does it get from manifesto to, like, you know, a foundational part of pop culture that everyone acknowledges is very important and it makes the artist unimpeachable?
Yeah. I think that's a good point to raise. I feel
I
like
think, right?
I feel like it's one of those things where it is a slippery slope, you know? A part of me is like, okay, maybe he did step over a line by specifically targeting 15,000 people that were drafted, right? But if you prosecute and throw somebody in jail for sending letters to people just with your own argument about why being involved in a war is bad, and I urge you to resist. Like, I don't know. I feel like it's a slippery slope if you get somebody in trouble for that. I mean, it's like the government having too much control over what you're saying to others.
Right? What's the difference between Fortunate Son and some dude who spends his grandmother's inheritance in Kinko's photocopying 15,000 war flyers at the height of the first Iraq War? Absolutely not a thing I did.
Again, maybe
Confessionals.
something we talk about after the podcast. I feel like we got a lot of lore to dig up on Adam today.
I know, really. What's
Maybe we'll have a
going on
special
here?
bonus episode on that.
I do. Unfortunately, I do feel like this is a pretty cut and dry one.
Oh no!
Wait, for
So-
who?
For me,
Yeah, for who? I don't know.
I do. I think it's, the context, right? I think Jarrett was saying in his argument, right? The context matters. So, if he had taken these exact same flyers and just blasted them out to, 15,000 random people, some people who are in a position to refuse and some people that were not, then that's simply a demonstration of his opinion. But by targeting 15,000 people exactly and no others, that it kind of it does seem a little bit more like espionage. And yeah,
You're going to prosecute this guy for inventing targeted marketing like 50 years
Yes.
anyone else actually figured this shit out?
Absolutely. I'm done with that. Targeted ads.
Okay,
Kill me now.
You're just jaded because you're physically chained to a CRM of some sort. But this guy,
Honestly true.
this guy should have teamed up with the lottery guy.
Honestly
Oh,
true.
yeah.
Yeah,
This
that's
is
true.
Adam's doctrine of go get 'ems.
Yeah.
This is a go get 'em kind of guy.
I feel like it's very important to understand the framework of the civilization and society that you live in. And the one that we live in is merciless. It's merciless in favor of whoever can capitalize the best on the foibles of their fellow man. So lottery guy and like affiliate marketing guy in whatever era had a draft, like doesn't matter which era it was, he was way ahead of his time. Those guys have to team up. They're going to take over. They're going to invent Google in the 70s.
Or sooner.
I mean, it does seem like prototypical, SEO.
That's what I'm saying.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Did he update his robots.txt?
Oh yeah, no, I'm going to respond to counsel on that
Oh
one.
no. Oh god. I thought you were back to clerks.
No,
Yeah.
I'm responding to that statement because that statement downplays what the government is arguing the actual crime is. Like, oh yeah, he just gathered a bunch of addresses. Yeah, and then cajoled those people to do crimes.
Yeah, but what crimes?
Google turns out will not let me run ads to try and convince people to do crimes.
No, but they'll certainly
Have you
allow the
tried?
robots to index my website that
Facebook
knows how
might.
to do crimes.
Oh yeah. Meta one.
Accurate. Yeah, I think it's very clear. Like the espionage is very clear. Willfully obstruct the recruiting or enlistment service. So we're talking about the enlistment service here, and this was a targeted attack on people who were drafted. It's pretty cut and dry for me.
I think just the part that I keep getting hung up on is like the actual effect of this messaging. Because like if he sent this to 15,000 people saying, "Hey guys, don't join the draft, it's a bad thing." And then nobody heeded his advice, who cares?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it doesn't matter. Like they could just be looking at this guy like, "Oh, I don't know him. Throw it
That's
away."
kind of what I was saying earlier. Like he must have had some effect for the government to have cared enough to have sued him all the way up to the Supreme Court. He must have had
Yeah,
some
and
effort. Like this must have had some impact on the recruiting efforts.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the First Amendment free speech is really big. And yeah, context is important. Ugh, guys, am I gonna have to side with Jarrett?
I mean, you don't have to agree. I'm saying, I don't necessarily think it violated his right to free speech because he committed a crime. I mean, yeah, we don't have to agree on it. Or we could just say that he, it was his right to be able to print that stuff. But no, I think he's committed a crime by sending it. If he printed that exact same flyer and just sent it out to 15,000 random people, men and women and whatever, I'm assuming this is a while ago. So before,
Yeah, I think it was just
the
men.
draft. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of thinking like, I don't know. I still feel like maybe it is within. What if that? Okay. What if all 15,000 of those people were just like friends of his that also happened to be drafted?
It's a very specific age to have friends. Like I don't. And also demographic. I mean, not everybody gets drafted.
I don't know. This one, I'm having a harder time with this one because I do feel like it should be within your right to like disseminate information like that, and I mean,
to target people that, yeah. Well, that's the thing with wartime. The Espionage Act is very specific about what you can and cannot do, and it's kind of like it is a little bit of a removal of rights. I feel like it does, and I'm trying to stay on the topic here where we're talking about violating his First Amendment right. But the Espionage Act itself is very, I mean, under normal circumstances, that is a very extreme measure, compared to the Constitution as it's written.
Yeah. I think it would be easier for me to decide this, obviously, if we knew maybe what war we were in. Like, what's happening?
Yeah.
What did Adam say? How much fascism are we dealing with, right?
Right, yeah, right.
What's the acceptable level of fascism, like, given the context of our societal position? Like,
based on the fact that this is a case, it feels pretty fascist at this time. So
yeah, like we're up against a mortal foe here to like, make this guy's newsletter illegal.
It feels very Vietnam War-y, but I mean that's just but there was a lot of this sort of thing happening during.
I've been going back and forth, man. It could be Civil War, it could be World War II, it could be Vietnam. Like,
whoa. Yeah,
like
true.
all of these times did not
Storm.
have internet, and that's terrifying to me. Like,
yeah.
you had to like arrange blocks on a print press, and not clear how you got messages out at that time and place. Put a classified ad in the
Yeah.
newspaper?
Okay. Adam, where are you leaning? What's the temperature on this?
I am in favor of free speech absolutism pretty much always. It's
Yeah.
really, really, really hard for me to come up with a circumstance in which free speech is not acceptable. Like,
That is kind of where I'm
child
at.
sex abuse material is one example where I think free speech should be abridged.
Yeah.
Giving
That's fair.
Yeah.
examples of how to literally like 3D print like a pandemic virus, in the time and place in which that's an applicable concept.
Yeah.
Eventually, when we get there, that should be illegal. Yep. So
no
I'm
3D printing biohazards, guys.
don't prey on
so-
children and don't print viruses. That's pretty much where I'm at. That's my doctrine.
By that same logic, right? Let's pretend the United States is not at war, and say this guy made a whole bunch of pamphlets that said "Let's kill the president," and then printed them and sent it to all the gun owners in a 10-mile radius. Only the gun owners, and that's the way that I'm looking at this.
Yeah, I like this. Okay, keep going. Flush this out more.
Why? So that would obviously be a crime. Like,
Okay,
they
so
have.
Going back to my earlier point, yes, probably everyone would say that's a crime if you make it a song.
Right.
And it's like it's a really good song.
Sure.
It's a good song that people like.
If you're part of Green Day, maybe would write that song, potentially. But like, yeah, I mean, that's technically a crime, right? So, like in this case, we're
part of
in
Green
a little bit
Day.
more of a strict. Yes. Yes. But no, my point was
okay. What if Green Day writes a song that is
yeah.
specifically like, we have to get Jill Stein? Green Day has a #1 hit. And that #1 hit's like, hey, everybody, I know that you heard our hits in the 90s and that was super cool, but we need you to really listen and pay close attention. You got to get Jill Stein. Go string her up. Like wherever she is, whatever she's doing, just get her and murder her. And that's the chorus to the new Green Day song.
Entirely a hypothetical situation that, ironically, if it wasn't, Adam would be committing a crime right now.
It was an example of something that you shouldn't
Freedom
do.
of speech.
Just being very clear.
Right,
Hypothetical example.
That is where that's why I led with this.
My freedom to provide a terrible example to the children and everyone else. Don't do as I do.
We're gonna have to rate this podcast as mature.
Oh yeah, big time.
It's okay, we already do.
Have you guys heard the new Green Day single? You have to get Jill Stein.
But so if Green Day only released that song to able people that potentially had the means that were close to Jill Stein, then hypothetically that would be a crime.
Okay, Stoneface Serious 2024. How do you actually do that? Like you're paying AdWords like $5 an impression. That's a very, very specific audience.
That's what I'm saying is like the context matters. So just because Green Day literally releasing as a song, that's not possible, right? Because songs are public domain, whatever. Once you go out into the radio, anybody can listen to the radio.
Clear Channel's not playing that song.
Stop.
Clear.
But in this, I'm just my point is, it's the targeting, right? Like like in my previous very hypothetical example, creating a pamphlet that says "Let's kill the president" and giving up steps and kind of coercing folks, and then sending that to people who are like gun owners or able people in a 10-mile radius, right? That's very targeted, as opposed to just sending that out there, which probably also is a crime, but we're not going to. That's neither here nor there. The point is, like, that seems to be coercion and targeting and willfulness of actually getting getting people together to do something that is a crime.
I mean, at this point, like, shouldn't the government just be more worried about like what we said earlier, having maybe better PR.
Right? Exactly. Like
if you're
recruit harder.
Be better about I mean, I understand, the context of wartime, things are probably pretty tense, but if you're gonna get somebody in trouble for sending out letters that are criticizing the government, I mean, what if this happens again and then, the context is different and somebody still gets in trouble for it and loses their
literally
liberties?
have a monopoly on force and you're worried about this nerd in his newspaper? Like, come on.
Yeah.
I don't think this is criticizing the government, though. I think this is obstructing or
it's criticizing the draft.
Right. Or but it's not just criticizing.
Is it obstructing? Yeah. Is it actually preventing people from being drafted?
Is it actually coercing though? Yeah. I feel like
draft people regardless of how they feel about it. Like, they can be upset. It doesn't matter.
Exactly. That's kind of what I'm thinking too. I feel like, I don't know. In my opinion, I feel like coercing these people would be more like, if you don't resist the draft, we're coming after you.
In fact,
or like,
the
resist the
ultimate
draft
Chad
or
move
else.
would be if they drafted this guy first.
Yeah, like
what's
this
he
guy
gonna do? Like, write another newspaper?
It didn't seem like CS was like threatening these people into not being a part of the draft. It just seemed like he was saying, I don't agree with the draft. Here's why you shouldn't agree with the draft. Therefore, resist the draft. I mean,
psych, you're going to jail anyway.
Yeah. I mean, you guys are all going to get drafted anyways. Like, what are you going to do? Right? I don't know.
They should have arrested this guy and then forced him to write a patriotic song.
Freaking commies, you know?
He's a good writer. His message is persuasive. They sued him. I think that this is the porque no los tres doctrine. Everyone goes to jail and this guy's forced to write a patriotic song under threat of death.
Under duress during the bombs. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, after spewing about this for the last 20 minutes or however long it's been, I think I'm just still hung up on like how solid the First Amendment is. And I don't know, context or not, I just feel like that is like the whole purpose of the United States. Like free speech is like the thing, you know?
It's literally the only reason why I care about being American. And free speech absolutism is going to be my brand, I think, on this podcast. So it's up to you guys. You guys fight. I'm going to break the metaphorical cue stick over my knee, toss it into the metaphorical circle in which you are metaphorically standing.
I don't know if I don't know.
Yeah, Sarah. It sounds like you're the.
I think
you're the swing vote
decider.
I'm the swing vote, but I think I'm swinging towards free speech absolutism. I fear
that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. And it's not just because I don't want to agree with Jarrett. It's
sure.
There's more to it. I think free speech is very important, and if we lock up CS for sending out a bunch of pamphlets saying, "Here's why I don't like the draft. Here's why you shouldn't like it. Don't do it." But like, we don't actually know if there were repercussions from that. Like, I don't know. These 15,000 individuals that got this letter from Bro have a mind of their own. You know, they weren't like, I don't think they were really coerced. They can read it and crumple it away and throw it in the trash and just be drafted anyway. It's like,
who's to say they're not the most physically unfit specimens in the entire U.S. population? Like, these are the doughiest fuckers.
None of them can do a pull-up.
Yep.
Like, you don't want them in the military anyway.
None of them have asthma.
It's 1936.
They all have asthma.
It's 1936, and every single one of them are subscribers to Weird Tales magazine. You don't want these people.
My thing is, the Espionage Act is so severe that it's not just causing and whether it caused, it's attempting to cause. And so I am normally I'd just be like, yeah, free speech, but like, because of the Espionage Act and because of how severe that is, that's kind of where I'm leaning.
I don't know a lot about the Espionage Act, but I feel like it was designed to target someone or something very specific. Like they built it purpose suited to like put someone in jail, and it's just been on the books ever since.
It's so wide. it's so wide. I mean,
Yeah.
just as the free speech amendment is very wide, the Espionage Act kind of casts a wide net. It's like, don't even think about it. Like, yeah,
It's the
it's pretty
anti-First
scary.
Amendment.
Yeah, it's a little bit
It is
too much of Uncle Sam, like peeking through your windows and seeing what you're up to.
Yeah, exactly.
For my liking.
Which
well, I mean, every call is recorded and listened to anyways these days. No internet privacy. Like, what can you do?
You know, actually, that's funny. I've never thought of the enormous administrative and espionage state as a sort of dark counterbalance to the rights afforded to us by the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment and Constitution generally. Like, you know, most countries don't have the sort of latitude of individual freedom that U.S. citizens do. Certainly, most countries don't have like freedom of bearing arms like we do. But you know, freedom of speech is something that a ton of countries don't have. Like, you know, their right to actually speak freely is curtailed far more severely than it is here.
And I have one more point that just came to my brain too. Right? Didn't oh gosh, was it in the facts of the case earlier in the episode that they were saying, Nikki was saying that CS made the point in the leaflet that it violates the 13th Amendment.
You're no better than criminals. I think that's a real argument. That's serious.
Yeah, like involuntary conscription is a thing, right?
At any moment, they can take your rights away to the extent that they're allowed to take away the rights of anyone who has been deemed criminal. And right, like they can do that without the criminal process. That's crazy. That's kind of unnerving to our modern sensibilities, I feel like.
Yeah, and so I don't think. I mean, even though it's wartime, and the Espionage Act is a thing. One fellow American telling thousands of other fellow Americans what they're getting themselves into, like, hey, as a reminder, you have rights as a citizen. You don't have to be part of the draft. Here are all the reasons why I think you shouldn't. He's not forcing their hand. He's just, giving his own argument.
This is where you blow our minds and tell us that this is 54th President Barron Trump exercising his executive right to rally us against the alien menace.
Are we that close to the rapture?
I'm sure.
I was giving him 40 years. That's 54th president. That gives him enough time to become cybernetically augmented and become meta-human.
Okay, team. Well, order back in my court.
Yeah. Please get some order in this.
Please let's get some order back in this court, please. Okay. So I think it sounds like we all have a consensus here. Can we sign off on that?
You're the Chief Justice.
I almost called you Chief Justices.
I mean, if we're at war, you could throw us in jail and just overrule whatever we decide. I think that's what we learned here.
I'm a very egalitarian Chief Justice myself. Okay, all jokes aside, I feel like we have our decisions. Correct? Are we firm in our...
Affirmed.
Chris is affirmed. Adam, are you affirmed?
I'm feeling real gelatinous these days, but my decision is absolute.
All right. Decisions are affirmed. They are not gelatinous. So, Chris is siding with the United States, and myself and Adam. We are the free speech absolutists on this court today, siding with CS. Schenck.
Good old Schenck. I subscribe to his newsletter to this day. I'm not biased.
Does Chris want to have a spicy dissent?
Yeah.
I
Regale us.
Yeah, right?
Tell us about how sad you are about the death of justice.
How your colleagues
make us feel so disappointed.
Yeah, are stupid and they don't see the future that you see.
Honestly, no, because my thing is actually I would have gone with free. Normally, I would go for the free speech, but because the U.S. is at war during this time, I had to follow. I'm just following the book on this one.
That's true. We have to defeat the alien menace, and we have to rally at all costs to destroy them. And that means completely curtailing all of our I mean, at least the first 15 amendments. I lost track after that. I'm not clear what they're
just wondering
protecting.
too.
We need more leaflets.
Yeah.
More leaflets. So that's my dissent. I was just following the book.
All right. And anyone have anything to add? Anybody or Jarrett?
Go ahead and tell us how stupid and misguided we've been.
Stunned, speechless.
I'm good. I can't. I'm
Slow
just
clap.
waiting for the reality to set in. Whenever you're
Oh,
ready, hit
God.
him with it.
Yeah. You guys ready to hear what happened in the real case?
No, but tell us anyways.
Yep, our decision directly led to the sappers destroying the White House from within. They built literal tunnels under the literal White House and literally blew it up because of our literal decision to allow free speech.
I mean, not quite. So first of all, this case was argued and decided in 1919.
Oh, World War One.
So
Damn.
yeah, World War One.
We were wrong.
My fourth
Yep.
guess.
We would have gotten there eventually. You know,
Eventually.
there's only so
Yeah.
many wars that this country
True.
has actually been in. So,
That we know of.
well, that's fair. Okay.
Mm.
Continue, Nikki.
So and it was a unanimous decision, and that
Oh.
decision was that the Espionage Act did not violate the First Amendment. So the reasoning, and this
You're
is
going to jail, nerd.
I don't
basically.
deserve this powdered wig. Actually, no, I stand by my decision.
And so, to quote the decision, in many places and in ordinary times, the defendants, in saying all that was said in the circular, would have been within their constitutional rights. But the character of every act depends on the circumstances in which it is done. So, and then the justice who wrote the decision, Holmes, says that free speech does not protect someone, quote, falsely shouting fire in a theater and causing a panic, end quote, or protect someone against saying words that have the effect of force. As a side note here, because there was a little bit of a rabbit hole, so it turns out people shouting fire in crowded theaters was a legit problem that caused panics.
Wow.
That at times injured and like killed people on multiple occasions in the late 19th and like early 20th century.
Hey,
hell are they
everyone,
doing?
they're going to draft you. Don't panic, or I don't know, maybe do a little bit.
But the people being in theaters, crowded theaters, and falsely yelling fire, it was described as a pervasive problem. And it was part of popular discourse. So I read this academic article that kind of went all into it. And it happened like frequently. And
This
it was
goes back to my example. Like the only things that people like care to tamp down on are things that become a problem, right? Like if people didn't yell fire in a theater, if that never caught on, no one would ever cite it as an example. But it makes total sense that it was like a fad that people are like, yeah.
It was definitely a part of like popular discourse. Like I was reading this accounting of like all the different little stories and things. And basically if Reddit had been a thing there would have been like a subreddit dedicated to this phenomenon.
I'm gonna wait until that
there was-
dude is about to do his big stunt on the screen where
Yeah,
he
there
like
was at least one story told in like, that somebody wrote where a guy just for shits and giggles yelled fire in a theater and there's like a huge panic, and then he went home and it turned out his daughter had been at the theater and she got killed. This was a thing. It was an actual major thing.
Yikes.
Yeah. So there's speculation among scholars that, in his opinion, Holmes lifted the analogy from the wording used by a prosecutor in a different criminal case, Debs, which would later end up before SCOTUS, and I will get to that later. Anyway, side note over, back to the main ruling. So they say that one has to consider whether the words are used in circumstances and are in nature that would create, quote, a clear and present danger that they will bring about the substantive evils that Congress has a right to prevent, end quote. So the substantive evil in question was subordination, and the defendant intended to cause soldiers to resist the draft. So this is sort of where this test comes from about clear and present danger and all of that. So they're saying that during times of war, statements that, normally in peacetime people could say may be such a hindrance to the war effort that they are not constitutionally protected. They're saying the leaflets could disrupt the recruitment process. And if actual obstruction of recruitment were proven, then there could be liability for the words that caused it. So the law is punishing conspiracies to obstruct and also actual obstruction. Therefore, the Espionage Act does not violate the First Amendment. It's part of Congress's authority during wartime, and they were saying that the courts need to defer more to the government during times of war, even with respect to constitutional rights.
Well,
Rough.
yeah,
Unanimous, too.
it's tough out here.
Like, no dissents at all.
Correct.
Not even one.
I think the thing we've learned today is that, like, the courts of yesteryear would not have had any preparation for the internet. No ability to handle it whatsoever.
We are dealing with a whole new animal these days.
Mm-hmm. And I would add that this case sort of establishes this idea that while the First Amendment does protect speech, the protection is not completely without limits. You have to consider context in determining whether it can be restricted on this case-by-case basis. Also, as an end note, apparently there was no evidence that the pamphlets in this case caused anyone to refuse to report.
That's what kills me here, right? Because, like, it seems like then that those words were hollow and they didn't actually cause any damage. I get it, conspiracy. It could,
But it was an
have.
attempt.
Yeah.
Relevant detail that was left out in the proceedings.
Right. Like, I guess that's why we charge people for attempted murder, right? Because you tried.
Yes.
Right.
It was just a 64-page chapbook of free verse poetry, and nobody read it.
But to your point, Adam, so this case was decided and it was written by Holmes. And then a week later, the same guy wrote the decision of Debs versus the United States, where he basically backed down from this decision. Yes. And in Debs versus the US, which, remember, that's where the prosecutor was saying fire in a crowded theater, and then Holmes wrote it in this decision. Anyway, he said that in that case that a conviction under the Espionage Act could stand if the words actually caused some obstruction of enlistment efforts. So in this case, they were like, yes, Espionage Act. And then a week later, they're like, well, I mean, if it does something, they back down.
Okay, so I feel like you're saying that, like, Adam and I we were kind of right.
I think you guys raised some really important and valid points.
I don't think
as
there's
usual.
a wrong.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it's fair to say that anyone here is necessarily wrong or right. What you could say is you weren't entirely off from maybe where the case law eventually went.
That's good.
Yeah.
I mean, I think,
I'm not all bad.
We've had a lot of free...
Well,
we've had a lot of free speech cases over the years. Yeah. But
yeah, especially nowadays where we live in a society where everybody can spew whatever bullshit that they want to from whatever mountaintop they want to from.
yes.
And it's like, yeah, it's fine. They're talking crazy, but, like, free speech, it's okay.
Yeah, and I guess social media literally is that platform because now context doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so they can do whatever the fuck they want.
Exactly. Crazy town. 1919 really must have been super crazy town back then.
Yeah.
I mean, when people weren't causing panics in theaters, they were banding together to fight the Germans.
Fair enough. You know,
They're not going to fight themselves.
So I'm gonna put my historian hat on for a second. Actually, use my degree a little bit here. I don't think that we are so divorced from what society looked like in like 1917. And not only just like what it looked like, where you think like, oh, we're so advanced, like not that, but just sort of what was going on in the world. Well, I don't want to say the world because that's a very Eurocentric view of things, but like specifically in Europe and North America, in trade and with the war as it dragged on. This is a time where the U.S. Capitol was bombed, which a lot of
Oh.
people don't
Oh, I
know.
forgot about that.
And then the guy who bombed the U.S. Capitol hopped on a train, took it all the way to Connecticut, broke into the house of Rockefeller, I want to say, and shot him. This was a German agent. There was almost like weekly explosions in the New York harbor from German saboteurs. Like Germany was fighting a war against America in espionage for a good portion of the war, to the point where like we think like, oh, Wilson deliberated on the war and eventually he came down on the side of it because of like the Lusitania and the Zimmerman telegram. And it's like, yeah, that stuff matters. But like Wilson was the last person to be like, we got to go rough him up. At least as I recall. I mean, he was like late to the party. There was a lot of tension in the society at that time. Things were happening everywhere. And it just seemed like that things were out of control. And I'm probably being a little hyperbolic about that, but like, it's, and we think, because we went through the global war on terror. I mean, I think we're still technically going through the global war on terror, because I don't think something like who's to say where the end of that is.
I don't know. I haven't felt terrorized in quite some time. At least not
can
by foreign
change that.
actors. Yeah, this was the time where a
Imagine
particularly spicy newsletter.
Explosions in the U.S. weekly.
Yeah.
Right, and it's a different mindset. And I think where the Supreme Court was coming from was this idea of like the law is pretty narrow. In a time of war, you can't do this specific thing. We're not saying you can't talk. We're saying you can't do this specific thing. Don't do the specific thing. Oh, you did the specific thing? Yeah. Stop. I think that's probably where the court was coming from. I mean, I don't
To jail
personally.
with you.
Yeah. I don't personally agree. I like the walked back version. I like the better to err on the side of free speech, than to limit it, personally. Thing is, but I also putting myself in their world at that time, which that's why we don't tell you the year, because
Right.
we don't want you to do that. We want you to say, how do I feel? Yeah. So I think I can understand where the government was coming from. Oh, this was also the rise of communism in Russia, which, by the way, I think by this point, I forget my Russian history, but I think at this point, Russia had pretty much collapsed. Might have been even out of the war.
That feels right.
Right? The Bolshevik Revolution had happened. The Leninists had taken out the Tsar and his family and shot them all in a field.
And up until this point, the
Jesus.
plutocrats in the United States had felt very little resistance to, owning everything.
Different time.
Yeah.
But not too different.
Well,
It's still all fucked. I don't.
yeah.
I still love the fact that we all think of the idea of like you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. And it's like, yeah, of course. I mean, somebody did it and it went up to the Supreme Court and they're like, you can't do it. It's like, actually, no. Somebody sent around 15,000 pamphlets about resisting the draft. And their argument for why you can't do that was you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. So clearly there are limits to free speech. And if there are limits to free speech, then why can't this be one?
Slippery slope.
The slipperiest of slopes.
Mhm.
Wow, I need to stop talking for the evening.
So okay, I'm gonna take my history hat off. I'm gonna put my fire helmet on as a long-time call
God.
volunteer firefighter. And that whole like you can't yell fire in like a crowded theater, like, yeah, that's bad. Don't do that.
Can confirm.
Yeah, that's terrible. Don't do that, please.
Oh, I was
Nobody wants
looking up dude guy who did the bomb at the Capitol back in this day, and it was actually Jack Morgan he tried to kill, who was the son of J.P. Morgan.
Morgan, sorry.
No
Wow.
way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's tea.
Man, small world.
That's hot tea.
Small world. Jesus.
There is a really good book about this period of time about the investigators who were trying to hunt down all the saboteurs, and about this this assassination attempt and the bombing at the Capitol, because the folks who are responsible, because basically New York Harbor was like the Lend-Lease capital of the war, where, technically we were neutral until we entered the war, but Britain's navy was so good that there was no way that we could actually trade via the ocean with Germany. So we were just de facto supplying England, which was Germany's argument, was like, you're not neutral, so we can attack you. And it's like, no, we are neutral. It's like, no, you're not neutral. You're only supplying one side. You're not really even trying to help. You won't sell us stuff out of fear of it sinking. So what's the difference at the end of the day? And that's where the sabotage comes from. So originally, the folks who tried to unwind the bombing and the attempt on Morgan's life were the same investigators from New York City who were investigating pipe bombs. The way the Germans would do it is they would put these pipe bombs on a timer, and so what happened is the ships would get out of the harbor, just into the into the deep water, and that's where where the bomb would go off, cause a catastrophic problem, and the ship would sink. So it was clearly very well planned, and the New York City police were responsible for figuring out how this was working and who was responsible and unwinding it. And what they eventually ended up finding was this greater conspiracy within the United States perpetrated by the German government to cause just absolute widespread havoc. And I think they just narrowly prevented the Germans from blowing up a major weapons development facility. Actually, they may not have prevented it. I can't remember. I'm going to go find the book now and recommend it for anyone who's listening who might be interested. It's a very good book.
Link in bio.
Nice.
Yeah, if CS just had like TikTok,
Right? I feel like we really learned something today.
Yay!
Found it. Dark Invasion, 1915. Germany's secret war and the hunt for the first terrorist cell in America, written by Howard Blum. Highly recommend. Very entertaining read, very informative, very good. It's kind of like a true crime, but it's like intrigue and espionage and bombs.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. So what do we learn here?
Wartime is scary for freedoms.
If you're gonna try to convince people to do a crime against the government,
make it a cool song.
Make it a cool song. Put a drum track on it,
Don't make it some stupid nerd pamphlet that you just mailed 15,000 unwitting recipients.
Like,
leave
what
it
if
to Green Day?
Yeah, leave it to Green Day.
Green Day. Yeah,
or
exactly.
what if you like printed your message on T-shirts and sent them out to people as like a fun gift?
Right? Just like
That could
Green
be
Day.
fun.
Could be fun.
You know what people can do, whether regardless of whether if you agree with the Supreme Court and you think that free speech should be abridged, then what you should do is show your support and subscribe.
There
Hit
it
that like
is.
button.
Nice.
And if you believe that free speech is absolute, you should exercise your free speech by subscribing.
Oh,
Yep.
goes both
And
ways.
that is how collectively we come together and beat the machine.
Yeah.
By
I would like
subscribing.
to also add that you should rate us 5 stars
Yeah,
on
absolutely.
whatever platform you are
And like-
consuming this.
Don't write
Link
a
in bio.
24 stanza epic poem about resisting the draft. Like and subscribe.
Yes, exactly. Well,
Or do both.
Like and subscribe, and then go write your screed.
Right. We're not going to stop you. Free speech.
Yes.
For the most part, it seems.
Right. Well, now, but not in 1917.
Some restrictions may apply.
Right.
Context is important.
Yes. Yeah. Any parting thoughts before we slink away dejected as we always do?
We're on a roll here.
Yeah.
Nah, I'm just getting ready to slink off.
I've been slinking all day.
Yeah. Oh, that's it. I feel like I learned something. And And I still stand by being a free speech absolutist.
Right. Ultimately, teaching us something was the entire nefarious point of this entire operation. So great job.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much, Justice.
Yes. Thank you very much for your time and for your thoughts. It was actually, I don't know, it was really great to hear you guys deliberate and think so deeply about this.
I actually had to give Jarrett's argument a little bit of thought this time.
I know, right? You were getting soft.
Yep.
Yeah. I love being humored. Why I show up. Can't stress enough that, the arguments that I've been tasked with don't always drive with my actual personal feelings. I'm a professional. Someone pays me to do a job. I show up. I argue it.
Oh, yeah. So the reason we decided to do this case was because we were sitting around and talking and being like, what case should we do? And I pulled out this case where basically I was like, oh, here's the question. And then Jarrett made a guess. And then I told him what the decision was in this case. And he got so upset that his voice went up like an octave or two. When
Shame.
I told him the results. He kind of flipped out a little. And I'm like, oh, we got to do this one.
I
Yeah.
vaguely remember looking it up and yelling, Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote this? And then just tremendous sadness.
Hence the slinking away into the darkness.
Yes. Which I am now going to go do.
Yeah.
Well, don't worry. There's plenty other Supreme Court cases.
All right. Well, good jurisprudence, everybody.
Excellent jurisprudence.
Jurisprudence.
Oh, really was holding that in.
Have a good jurisprudence.
Merry jurisprudence.
And there you have it. A divided decision ultimately in favor of Schenck, with Chris dissenting. This ruling does not at all match the real Supreme Court, which ruled unanimously in favor of the government in deciding that there are limits to free speech. That's it for this episode. But before we go, thanks again to my co-host and to our justices. The music in this episode was written by Studio Columna and Toby Smith, and provided by Pixabay. Audio mixing and producing was done by Jarrett. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and comment so other people can find us. You can also catch us on YouTube and Instagram at Relitigated Podcast. Please help us spread the word. All right, until next time, I'm Nikki, and this has been Relitigated. Bye.